Hey, it's Chris. What are you doing today? We're talking about a card game. The Folk of the Air, young adult, fantasy-style novels is coming to you with Enemies and Lovers, The Crown of Elfhame. And this 2 to 4 player card game, a little bit of Take That, a little bit of King of the Hill, and some art to go along with it. What do you need to know with this game? How it plays, pros, cons, who is it right for? Should you check it out? Let's go. So as you can see here, we have a prototype here, and what we've got going on card-wise is just this nice large stack of cards that you're going to be shuffling through as a deck. And when you pull all these cards together, you're going to have several different types of cards that are going to be available to you that are going to be utilized in order to achieve the end game victory condition, which is having your tableau, your court as this game is called, of 4 cards. Now the tricky part is there's only a limited number of each of these cards in the deck. And there are the 4 types of cards that you need, but there's a lot of potential take that back and forth cards that are going to mitigate, that are going to disrupt the plans of your opponents. So essentially what you're doing in this game is you start out with 3 cards per player. And these cards form your hand. And you're going to be slowly laying and revealing these cards down in front of you to establish what's called your court. And your court is actually going to be turned most of the time face down until somebody forces you to face up those cards and reveal what they are. Because you might be attacking, you might be trapping, you might be poisoning, or even stealing, depending on who has what and at what time. And if you're familiar with the board game Chaosmos, it takes a little bit of a card game driven spin on that, where in Chaosmos there is this one card that you need to have at the end of the game. And this takes a little bit different spin on it, and it says instead of having one card at the end of the game, there is one card, the aforementioned in the title, Crown, that you need to have in order to complete your 4-card tableau that's in front of you. Because you need a prince, you need a co-conspirator, you need a coercion, and you need a crown. And so the crown is numbered in 1s, but all the others, there are multiple of. And 3 of those cards that I just mentioned, apart from the crown, all have double use as well. So not only can they be utilizing your tableau, but they're going to have other actions that you're going to be able to utilize in order to strengthen your resolve, your hand, or your chances at winning. This is a very, very head-to-head take that game. Essentially, all you're doing on your turn is you're grabbing your cards, you're looking at them and saying, okay, what do I have? Spy, steal a court card, shield. Shield protects you from attacks. I can literally steal other people's court cards. It doesn't say if they're face up or face down, so you just get to steal it and then force the opponent to flip over a hand or card and destroy a trap card or even go under the shields that we mentioned previously. And so what does that look like? Well, you can see my tableau here. I have a shield face up protecting one of my cards here. And this card, in this case, is one of the coercion cards. It tells you nicely, you don't need to remember what the victory conditions are. Coercion plus prince, co-conspirator here, and crown. Or you can play it as a draw too, because on this game, you're going to be playing a card and drawing a card. That's basically the gist of it. It's very tactically based. What's in your hand, there you go. And at the bottom, it also tells you 2 little key things here if we blow this up. What you can see here in the lower left-hand corner is it's a plus whatever, and then either a little symbol or a little strike through the symbol. The plus means how many cards you're drawing after you play it. And then this tells you whether or not you can be interrupted with the trickster card. Now, there's one trickster card and there's one counter trickster card in the game as well. Basically an interrupt that allows you to stop an action that might be having some take that towards you. And then the counter trickster just counters the trickster, right? Straightforward, very much so in that sense. Now, the tricky part in a game like this is that this is, well, like I mentioned, it's play one, draw one, play one, draw one. And there are some cards in here that kind of make it very swingy. And so the main thing that I would say with this is, how King of the Hill do you want to play? How follow or pile on the leader are you liking in a game in a nutshell? Because this can very much become that. And I mean, that's where I'd like to see this kind of go. Because as you're slowly looking through the cards in your hand here and saying, okay, which do I want to do, right? Coercion, Changeling allows you to take the place of a prince or co-conspirator here. And so it gives you options in that way. But again, there aren't many of these. So of these cards, you have to be very prudent in when or how you're going to play them. But you also can't be a little bit too shy with them either, because there are plenty of cards that are going to allow you to discard other people's cards, steal them right from their hands, or even swap courts or swap hands in the first place. So again, how direct take that do you like? Because otherwise all you're doing is playing one of them face up to the discard pile to get the active ability. So in this case, it would actually be more along these lines of stealing an opponent's court card here with the steal a court card, right? Well named. Or I'm playing the changeling card face down to represent either, as it says, my prince or my conspirator. And so I know what that is. I can't lay down more than one duplicate of the 4 types that I'm going to need. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, there's only 1 crown, so you can't duplicate that one, but I can't have 3 princes down as redundancies. I can keep them in my hand, but then they don't count as being in my court, and you have to have all 4 down in your court to win, not just be holding them here at the end of the game. And so therein lies the tricky dilemma of this game. Let's talk about pros and cons right now, right? This is a moderately sized deck. It's not overly large. It's not going to not give you cards that are useful, but the limitations of some of these cards, right? If there's only 4 prince cards, there's only 4 conspirator cards, there's only 4 coercion cards. So at the higher player counts, you might really have to try and steal other people's cards as opposed to ever being able to draw your own. And like I said, drawing is very limited. You're only potentially drawing 1 card at the end of your turn most of the time. Or some of the cards that even allow you to say draw 2 don't have the ability to draw additional down here, as you can see with this coercion card. Can be played as draw 2 if you don't want to use it for the coercion, if you already have one out, but it doesn't get you a plus anything else down here. So how do you deal with that? And again, some of these cards will actually, and this is probably the nicest mechanic as a whole, grab cards from the discard pile. That's awesome. I love that. And this one, just take any. Another card is draw 3 from the top of the discard pile here. So that mechanic is really, really, really nice. Assassinating other people's cards, taking them out, having to deal with the shields or dealing with the poisons. Again, I think that mechanic can really work because it gives me a little bit of Oriflamme vibes of laying that tableau out. At the same time, some of these cards with only a 1 use, and sometimes being so limited in the draw, you end up with cards that aren't always as useful, like if you get one of the trickster cards or one of the thief cards, and if you're playing with a lower player count here, either you don't have a great use for the spy, for example, of flipping someone else's up if they don't have much in their court, or you just don't really kind of get what you want, right? I mean, here's the aforementioned crown. Again, the art's nice on all of these, but slither out of attack. If you don't have an opponent that's going to be doing something, take that. This card can just sit in your hand and you can just kind of be stuck with it in a good way, but also in a way that there's not a whole lot of mitigation. There's not a whole lot of other ways to get other things in your hand. I mean, the first game we played, started playing, and the first card that my opponent played was discard all 3 of your cards. Well, that's kind of anticlimactic. I'm kind of from the get-go trying to play catch-up. And again, you know, the swapping of the hands and the swapping of the courts allows for that dynamic to shift gears very quickly. But when there's only one of those cards too, right? Like if things are going to be overpowered, you need everything to be overpowered, right? That's why games like Epic or even the more recently talked about Mindbug work so well. It's because everything is massively overpowered and just has massive amounts of swing. And so when you have this limit of a deck and this limit of an option, if someone pulls the right card, you just may not have a way to counteract it when there's only one interrupt card with a trickster. There's only one anti-interrupt. There's only one crown, which again, I like the mechanic of finding the crown because you might not want to put the crown out. You might want to hold on to it. There's a card that actually makes whoever has it reveal it. So those dynamics are in place. The structure of this game is there. But I think it's just missing a couple elements, you know, of either having a little bit multi-use with some of these cards as a whole, or even just more variability, or even just more quantity of some of the best cards, of getting more cards quicker. Because that's really where this game shines, is playing the cool cards, right? Like that's why Mindbug is so awesome. You play a cool card every single turn. And you're going to have turns, especially at the higher player counts with this one, I feel like, that are just going to be a little bit, not really as enthusiastic, don't really have anything good or kind of cool to play, and then it goes around to 2 or 3 other people before you go again. Now again, the turns are quick, you're only doing one thing, which makes it get back to you really quickly, but how many turns can you have like that in a row, especially in a heavy take that game where even at the higher player counts you may not really feel like you have a chance at getting in, because again, it's very draw dependent. Plays quick, but if also it doesn't necessarily play quick if that crown ends up at the bottom and you're sort of burning through the deck trying to get through it again and again and again. You've gotten, you know, 2 prince cards and 3 coercion cards, and you're just kind of waiting to kind of see what you can get. And so that's where it could overstay, just because, again, you're trying to find it. And so some other way of grabbing or getting the crown card, some other way of just having draws or getting more cards back into your hand, I feel like that's just what it needs at this point. Again, another element that's sort of a mixed blessing curse here is the playing of them face down. In theory, I really like this. But again, there's not enough trap cards to make it necessarily enough of a risk-reward situation to not have people attack your cards or take your cards if they're out there in the first place. Again, just a quantity of more traps. Because if you have 3 cards out there, chances are you have 3 cards that are useful. Not that you have 2 cards in a trap or 1 card in a trap. And making that more meaningful, making that more potentially damaging to the person who's doing that would, I think, balance it out a little bit nicer to have some of that take that, if you're going to have it in the first place, because I am a person who likes take that in these games as a whole. So final thoughts. I mean, again, the structure of this game is there. This is not a final product, so I'm interested to see what they can do with this, what else it's going to be on the crowdfunding page, what else they're going to have in store, if you're going to have an expansion or 2, if this is just a partiality of what this deck may be, right? Like, I would actually just love it if they said this deck, this is half the size of what it's going to be endgame. We're going to increase it, again, because of scarcity, not even necessarily the princes or the conspirators, but just the craziness of the take that's or the traps or the grab cards or the draw cards, like I mentioned. I'd love just to see more of that, or even more cards that have dual use, like the conspirators, like the princes. Just give me more of those either ors, right? To allow me some mitigation, to allow me some, get my tactical based situation here more of an option, rather than being a little bit pigeonholed into what I'm doing because I've only drawn these cards and they aren't giving me the variety or the variability in that sense. So that would be my concern as a whole. So I'd say right now, kind of wait and see of what else this has in store, because it's got a solid core, but it's not enough to make me necessarily want to play it over a bunch of those other games like I mentioned, in an Oriflamme or a Mindbug, where the balance is just so fine-tuned and, everything is crazy good. And, with Oriflamme, you're trying to decide which of these great cards do I not want in my hand. Same thing here. Again, small mitigations, right? Like, maybe if you have a card that causes people to discard 3, maybe start with more cards in that sense. Just little tweaks like that could balance that out. So if you put some of those overpowered things in there, it doesn't cause too much swinginess with the balancing of the I gotcha, sucker sort of, dynamics and mechanics that, I like utilizing in games, card games like this, as quick playing head-to-head, winner-take-all sort of games. And again, I like the Find the Crown. Just needs a little bit more support around it and go from there. At the same time, I know that, having more cards in this deck is going to make the crown even harder to get in the first place. Maybe make it a little bit longer than it should be, and maybe overstay its welcome a little bit. So again, something else mechanically to allow you to filter to, draw 5 and choose 1, draw 5 and choose 2. Like, there's one card that allows you to do that in there, but a few more of those things to cycle through it quicker could easily be taken care of. So there you go. Enemies and Lovers. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Comments, questions, concerns down below. And truth be told, I mean, this book series, Young Adult Fantasy series, has a pretty big following online. So if you want to go check that out too, I guess so. So my kids are not quite old enough for that sort of thing right now, thankfully. I don't know. That's all I got. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. See you around.